Alright, well today I'm making up a few stencils. I've got some stuff I want to mark, and this is electrochemical marking, and I use it for quite a few of my tools and little things that I build if I'm taking, or if I've, in the past, this is what I've used to mark gun barrels and that type of thing when we've rebarreled. So what I start off with is just a computer printed, and I use Word for simple stuff like this, a very simple pieces of clear transparency paper through my laser printer. I print off two of each thing that I want to print. And when you do print these, if you can, when you're just doing text like this, print them on the same line across rather than one above the other, because as they feed through the printer, why, they'll stretch at different rates and they won't align exactly. But I found one thickness doesn't really give you enough opacity on them, so I've always used two thicknesses of whatever, and I print them out. Like I say, I've got about 3 that I'm going to do today, and I printed off about 6 for different things that I'm doing, but we're just marking tooling is all we're doing. So, and we'll show that here in a bit. But this is my setup. I've got a little Mark 440 stencil maker, which is plenty big for virtually everything I do. This came from Matronics, which is right here in Washington, and I'll put a link to all this stuff. So this, I use their chemicals too. I've used some Electromark chemicals, which is what my marking machine actually is. But I just thought I'd show you the process of making the stencils. So we'll do the shaper index first, I think. And I've got my timer set. We've got developer here, and you'll see me doing a couple of different through the process because the camera's set up here to expose them, and then when we go to wash them, we'll do another setup. So I'll just, rather than really push myself trying to get everything done, we'll do a couple different stencils so I can do different setups. I've got my photosensitive stencil material here, and I've already got them cut to dimension for what I want. And now we're going to start the process, and I'll run it through. So we're going to take our Mylar, and this is all photosensitive, so you don't want to get too you don't want to screw around too long with it. And I trim these to shape afterwards, so they get set up just like that. We're going to expose them. They say from 2 to 2.5 minutes. For these stencils like this, usually about 2.5 with this setup. As your bulbs degrade and everything, why, it'll be a little bit different timing. On this photo film that we're etching the stencil into, it's got a plastic coating on both sides. So we're exposing these for about 2.5 minutes, and then it can sit from 30 seconds to a minute, and then it says to peel that paper off. I don't know if it releases a little bit more as time goes on or what the deal is, but you have to peel that off before you can expose it, or before you can develop it. I normally just, this is like watching paint dry, isn't it? I normally will just let it set for a few seconds and then start peeling it off. Then we're going to expose it for, about 40 seconds probably. They say at least 30 seconds. And we can kind of start washing it out a little bit as we go on. And there's our minute. We'll turn it off. I'll just reset that back to a minute and start it again. Now I save all my little transparencies just in case I do want to use them again. And that's really hard to see, and I don't know if it's going to show up on the camera at all, but you can see, yeah, I guess we can see the etching on there down through. And I usually just use a knife or a razor blade to peel the film off of both sides. Sometimes this will peel right off, and other times it's really a there we go. And we're already to that minute, so let's soak it, get it submerged. And of course, the longer it's in the developer, why the more it eats away at the photoresist. So you don't want to go too far, otherwise you end up with all your small lettering like this will kind of run together, and you don't get a nice crisp image. If you don't let it go long enough, why you run the risk of it not taking out enough of the resist, and it will not etch through. There's our 30 seconds there. So we're not in a big hurry. This little stuff, we've got time to etch it or to develop it. And our timer's set for the next one. Now we've probably gone long enough here that we can start kind of scrubbing it down. And I work both sides of it. And you can see when it actually will develop all the way through. I normally will hold it up to the light, and if the resist is pretty well gone, why I will go ahead and finish developing it. I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off. Now this is already starting to walk out of here. So see, it's cleared that much already. If I can get it up here into the camera. So we'll do just a little bit more, and then we'll come back with one here to develop. Alright, well here's our second one, and we've had it in the developer to where we saw through the first one. Now, the longer you leave these, the more resist it removes. So like I say, your image can get fuzzy. It also kind of thins out your stencil. So if you go too far, even if you're still going to get a fairly crisp outline, why it can actually move some of the resist from around the outside. And you're going to have to just trial and error to find out where kind of the sweet spot is. Now these, I don't worry too much about being too thin within reason, because and the life of your stencil will be less the thinner it is. You know, you're not going to get as many images transferred with it because it's going to eat through that resist every time. And I tape the edges with electrical tape when I put them on something to etch, so a lot of the times it will be it will pull along the edge where the tape is. So your life is limited on these stencils. For these, and like this one that says 5/16, it's going to be a one-time use basically, because when I tape it in place, I'm going to have to trim this one down on where it's going so much that it probably will not be really useful for anything else, even though I'll work it out if it works well and see if I can't get probably one or two more uses out of it should the need arise. But for the most part, this will be a one-time use stencil, so if it's a little bit thin, I'm not overly concerned about it. Now, if you get one that doesn't clean out as much as you'd like it to where it won't etch through, you can go back and put just a little bit of regular bleach on them and kind of rinse that out and wash out the center, but that tends to take all of the resist off if you leave it too long. If I've got something like this that's a one-time use and it won't etch through, which hopefully I won't have with any of these, why, I'll go back and hit them with a little bit of bleach and wash them out, and maybe I can save them. You know, part of the time you're better off just going ahead and throwing them away and making another one. It takes so little time and effort, and it's so inexpensive to do it. This one I think is going to look pretty good. You set them with warm water and then cold water, and you know, when you first start washing them out, they'll have a slimy feel to them, and wash it with warm water until you've got them pretty well cleared the way you think you want them, and then go back and set them with cool water, and you've got a stencil that's ready to go, hopefully. Dry them off, and there's what you end up with. This stencil looks just like that. So that's how I make my stencils. I'll show using them, at least one of them, and show it in use. I think I've shown them before, but we'll show them in use at least once and give you a little better idea. And I can show you the equipment that I've got that I actually use to etch these with. Okay, well, I'm just going to throw a picture of my marking machine, which is a Electromark SS751 is the model of it. I'm going to show you how I set up my marking heads. Now, this is the marking head that goes with it, and what I do, they of course make special little pads and everything to go, and there's a little wire mesh underneath here, and then they've wrapped it. Like I say, they've got special little pads that go on there. What I use is just little makeup removing cotton rounds. That's what they are. They're, you know, inexpensive. Buy them in a big pack. And it doesn't really matter which side you put on, depending on what stencil it is. If it's something fairly big and solid, I'll use the flatter side. Otherwise, I use the puffy side. I don't think it makes a bit of difference. Just on over the end. And I've used the oval ones of these, and I've played with other styles of. I've built some different heads for marking stuff and everything, and this does 99% of what I want. And I just have a tub of rubber bands here that match it, and we do a couple of loops around there, just like that. And there's my marking head. When I'm done, I throw the rubber band and the little cotton pad away, and take and wash out what's left of it here, and it works fine. I've already got my ground on the other piece here, on the piece of metal, and I'm doing a test piece first before I actually mark what I want. Plugged into one side of it, and these are rubber bands, and then my little pads. I just tuck them away. For electrolyte for steel, which is what I'm using here, I've used both the IMG stuff, which is the Electromark out of New York, and the only reason I don't probably use more of their products is they're clear across the U.S. You know, this stuff from Marktronics is right here in Washington. Takes me a couple of days to get it, and it seems to work just as well. You know, the machines that I've got, and I've got two of them. I've got a little Marktronics machine, and I'll throw a picture of it, or I'll throw a link to that one in there. It's fine for light duty small stuff. You know, for marking stuff like I'm doing right here today, it'd probably be fine. I bought the Electromark years and years ago, and I bought it used. Let's go down to let me give you a better view of this piece of, and I've just got a piece of flat bar on here, and all I'm doing is testing the stencil. So we're going to tape it in place, and then we'll just test the stencil, see how long it takes to mark, how easily it marks, and if we've got a good clean stencil for it to do. Sometimes your stencils will come out good, and there again, it's practice. There's a technique with all of it, so you just have to play with the equipment and find out what's going to work best for you. So, all right, I've just got a piece of flat bar on here, and I just knocked it off on the buffer, and we're just going to test this stencil right there. And I use black electrical tape. Now on a test piece like this, I'm just going to take down one edge. When I put it on something that I actually want a good mark on, I'll try and tape it securely in place. Now when you pull the electrical tape, usually it will pull part of the emulsion off of the film. So, you know, I try and leave as much as I can to get as much use out of the stencil, because sometimes it'll not work as well as it's supposed to. So, and all you do is take your electrolyte, and like I say, I can't actually tell the difference between one and the other. Now, if I would actually perform some tests on it, one probably does work better than the other, but for general purpose use, the Electromark stuff seems to work just fine. So I saturate my pad pretty well. Let's see, let's turn it on. And our settings are pretty well what I've got. Now you can either etch them AC or DC. Now DC will give you the deeper etch, and then AC will mark them black. So we'll see if we can't do both of them. So what I do, and normally I've got everything taped off, I don't want to do here. Now I've got a foot pedal, so I've got hung up here. I just use my hand. So we put it on there and hit it. The timer set. It should do everything it's supposed to do here. And it takes several of these little impressions or cycles. Now we've come off. So and it's starting to burn through. It takes a little bit to seat these stencils in too. So there we're starting to get a mark already. And if we just mark that way, it's not a bad mark. So this is going to be a really good stencil. So we're just going to do about 3 of these. I think will give us plenty deep. And I will rock them a little bit. It seems to work it on through the stencil a little bit better. You want your stencil down fairly solid, otherwise the electrolyte will get underneath and you'll get a little bit of etching that goes along there, you know, that goes under the edges. And I like to etch fairly deep. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. See, so now it kicked off. So it's just about 10 seconds is what I've got the cycle time set. And it's adjustable. You can set both the intensity and the mark time. And that gives me a plenty deep stencil. Now if you just want to mark something, so that's about what I'll use as my baseline, is probably 3 of those sessions will give me a plenty deep enough set. Now if you want to just mark something, you switch it over to AC, and it will give us a black marking underneath. So let's just show that. I normally don't use AC, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, and there it kicked off. So that should have given us, and it started the mark. If you're just marking, it works really well on the surface. If you've already etched it and are trying to mark it down, sometimes it does not mark as well. So let's run it one more time. And a lot of times I'll add electrolyte to the pad. Now I found the black marks will wipe out if you do very much work with them at all and don't leave that impression like they could. So I normally don't use it a whole lot. Now we've got a fairly decent, our 6 is still not really clear. Let's do another one and see if we can work it down. Let's add a little electrolyte. Just get a little more going on here. But what this has told me is I've got a good clean stencil. It will etch the way I want. And I'm going to leave that right there. This is just, I'm not going to use the DC or the mark function anyway. We're just going to etch them. So there's what we come up with. We'll wipe that stencil down real well. And we actually have a neutralizer here, you can spray on to neutralize your chemicals. And if we do a close-up, we get a mark like that. So that's what we're going to do. Just get all that extra electrolyte off of there so it doesn't bother our piece. What we're going to mark it on is this collet that we've just finished, and I think we'll align it on this finger, which will line up with our little keyway there. So we'll move it around once we get it set up. But what we're going to want to do, let's see, as you peel off your tape, if you're careful, hopefully you don't take too much emulsion, but normally it will. And it doesn't look like it's going to there, but a lot of times it will peel part of that emulsion off, so you end up with holes there. So what I want to do is cut this down to where it's fairly close to dimension, because otherwise it won't lay right when we tape it in place. And we want good contact all the way around. And this, like I say, is basically a single-use stencil. So we're just going to try and match our contour pretty close here, so that we can tape it in place. I want this stencil to lay pretty tight onto the collet. Let's see if that's going to do enough. This is usually just kind of a by eye thing, and it does not want to lay down quite as nice as I'd like it there. So let's try a little voodoo here. See if that will give us enough magic to get good contact with it. So that's what we're going to try and work with right there. I think maybe that'll work. We're going to find out real quick. Doesn't look bad. Stick our ground wire on here. A little more chemical, just because we can. Let's do this fairly quickly so that it doesn't start to loosen up and move around with that tape. See, we're starting to burn in pretty good there, so this is going to give us a good impression. We'll do 3 of those real quick. On some materials, and depending on how your stencil is, it'll take you 8 or 10 times to get a good impression. When you do that, you want to take it off between impressions anyway to let it gas off. That way it'll give you a better impression there. Let's do one more just for good measure, just because we can. Now, if I was doing a lot of things consistently, although I did for quite a while, I would probably have stencils made professionally. You can get them made from IMG. I've seen their samples. They're a very nice looking stencil. So you're going to get a longer life. They're probably going to give you a better stencil than you're going to be able to do in-house. But there again, for 90% of what I want to do, why, this I believe will work just fine. And then if we hit it with a little neutralizer, you can see along the edges where I said it would, it could slip underneath your stencil. Well, we've got a little bit of spider webbing there along the bottom of it. But if we take a piece of steel wool, a little oil under it maybe. Now, I probably could have stopped with 3. Now we have a collet that's properly marked. So yeah, that collet's completely done. And the first one that I bought, and I bought it years ago, was one of the little Etch-A-Matic systems from Martronics. These are still available. I think this is about a 2-amp machine. It's 110. It does okay, and for just marking stuff, it's probably a pretty good system. For me, for what I initially wanted it for, which was marking custom rifle barrels and things like that, why it doesn't have enough power to do it. I didn't care for it for that. It will work, but it's more hassle than it's worth. They make a typewriter stencil that you can put just in an imprint style typewriter, just a small one that fits perfectly on here. If you're just wanting to mark something, it works pretty well and it's quick and easy. You know, it's not as good as a professional grade stencil or a polymer stencil, I don't believe, but just to mark something, it may be a good option. You've seen me etch collets with it. Any of my little tooling like this turret lathe tooling that I built here back in 2019, last year, why, it's all etched with that machine. Yeah, and that's it, both of those. So I made up stencils to etch all of those, and it works really well. Anytime I've done a custom rifle, I use this to etch the lettering and my custom name on the, well, they would say hillsgun repair on the on barrels that I've done in the past. Professional looking setup, it works really well. And that's what I use on virtually everything that I want to look nice. I had built this is a sight fixture here, and I had etched it with that image machine, and this was done back in 2014. So that's the way it was. That was the way it was marked, and I'm very happy with that. Now, these were made with stencils that I produced here in house. You know, that was made off of a stencil machine. Hopefully, that will answer most of the questions about etching, electrochemical etching. You know, I use a little bit of everything. If I'm doing production parts where I'm doing a lot of one thing, I'm using CNC engraving. This comes off my little CNC machine. So that's another option that I do. I machine those out and etch them, and then they get anodized. So those are the way that I primarily mark stuff here in the shop. You know, hopefully that will answer any questions you've got. Like I say, any questions, ask them. We'll do my best to answer them. If you didn't have it already, I'd appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button, and if you hit the bell notification, you'll know when I put out a new video. And comments or suggestions, leave them in the comment section for me below. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch.